Welcome to the September 17 edition of Breaking the Line, the ECNL podcast, where Christian Lavers, ECNL President and CEO, and Doug Bracken, Vice President and Chief of Staff, tackle the latest, hottest issues. They begin by answering a question based off of the podcast 2 weeks ago, and then they take a deep dive into the coach, club, player, and parent communication channels. Oh, so important, and what a great conversation. And it all begins with this handoff to Christian Lavers.
Thank you very much, Dean, for that intro. As always, Doug, good to see you.
Good to see you, Christian. How's life in sunny, beautiful San Diego?
It is all of those things. Spent the weekend coaching and watching a lot of Zone 1 games again, which is entertaining.
Tell me, because this is really your first real venture into the Zone 1 coaching.
Last 6 months, yeah.
Last 6 months. You've talked about it. Now that you've experienced it, tell me how it's going.
It's good. It's good. It's challenging. I would say it's one of the, if not the most challenging coaching job I've done. I've said that to a few people just because of the dynamic of the kids and the range of interest, potentially to some degree, range of performance or ability, the maturity variations of kids. It's the newness of the parents. It's a job. I tell you what, if your kid is in Zone 1, give those coaches a high five. They're working hard.
It sounds like you're jonesing for high fives right
now.
No.
I'm good. I get lots of high fives. I get lots of high fives. What I'm saying is that, people, so many, and we know this, so many soccer coaches aspire to move into the older age groups. And it's the American soccer or American sports culture, right? Many American parents would assume that a college coach, by default of being in college, must be better than a youth coach because of just the levels of play, which is a complete inaccuracy, right? The level at which you coach does not have an indication of the quality of which you coach. And I think there's very, very different skill sets. So you could be exceptional at coaching college or professional sport and be really, really unsuccessful and not very good in coaching, not just Zone 1, but in a youth or a developmental oriented type age group.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the perception that, the level is, the pro college, then youth, whatever it is, I think is a false one. Because I think each takes, to your point, a really specific skill set. And I agree with you. A great professional coach may not be as successful as with the young players. So I give kudos to everybody out there who's doing it. It's a tough job.
If we were to go a little deeper in that, there's a couple of core coach skills. One is, let's call it, controlling or creating the environment, right? That's managing the team, before we get into anything about, interactions or interventions or anything that's soccer specific or sports specific. It's creating an environment where players understand how to behave, where you create, the right structures or just culture around having an appropriate learning environment and training environment. That's one sort of skill, I would say. And one of the two other skills that I'm going to highlight that I think are very, very different. One is, let's call it managing a game, which is the ability to, on one end of the continuum, we would say joystick, which is probably over control the player's decisions, constantly yelling, do this, do that. At a other end of the continuum, you would have, I think, the ability to identify a problem, a tactical problem on a field, and then identify a solution for the team. So I put that kind of under game management. That is maybe classic X's and O's. That is one skill of a coach varying degrees of importance, again, depending on age and context.
Yeah.
And then the other skill, which I think is very, very different, and I don't, for a lot of coaches, I don't know that they'd actually be correlated, which is the ability to teach understanding or biomechanics. So it's one thing, I'll just give an example. It's one thing for a coach to be able to look at a field, identify a space on the field where their team is consistently outnumbered or overloaded, and the reason why. And it could be system versus system. It could be an individual action of an opponent or your own players. That is one skill set to say, okay, we're getting beaten in this space on the right side because the outside back is taking a high position on their team and overloading our left midfielder 2v1, whatever it may be. And that's creating lots of problems. And here's the solution to that. You can, well, we won't go into what the various solutions are, but that's one skill example. And then the other one is, I'll use two different ones. One is the technical ability to break down a biomechanical action and teach a kid, hey, here's how you strike a ball. Here's what you do with your ankle. Here's what you do with your knee. Here's what you do with your core. Here's what you do with, the follow through. And be able to give that in a way that a young learner can understand. And then the other variation of that is being able to teach a young player where they should look, when they should look, why they should look, and then how do they make a decision between A, B, and C choices. So those sort of teaching skill sets and the game management X and O recognition skill sets, I think are very, very different. Agreed?
Oh yeah, yeah, no question about it. And
Which
to
one do you
be
think is more prevalent in coaching?
like, which people are better at?
Yeah, which of those two skills, let's call it game management, tactics, X and O's versus teaching, which one do you think most coaches are better at?
Ooh, is this like, are you trying to do a Laver's brainbuster right now?
No, well, I have an opinion. I have an opinion.
You do.
I do. I'm curious of yours.
Uh, Man, that's tough. I would think that people are generally more inclined to the technical side of things, their ability. I mean, I think you're going to disagree with me here, but I actually think it's a really hard thing um, to do both things. And what I mean by that is to be able to look out on the field and identify what is happening and what is going wrong and what is the solution to that is a tough thing to do. It is also tough to coach players individually, both technically and tactically. But I think generally when I'm out looking at coaches, they're giving team instruction more than breaking down probably
So, all right.
technical
So
stuff.
I don't know. I think you started one way and
I
ended
know,
up the
yeah,
other.
yeah, but yes, I mean, yes, I kind of contradicted myself right there. I think the coaches, a lot of coaches, and I don't want to speak in total generality here, but they're way better at giving team instruction than individual instruction.
100% agree.
Yes,
I
I'm a
think that
winner.
I think there are far more coaches who are adept at identifying team
I
issues or
think you
tactical
were
issues.
I think you were a lot more specific than I would be. I would just generally say, because I wouldn't say just because they're giving team instruction that they're good at it or
Well,
identifying the
okay,
problem, right?
so we can, you can further peel the onion on it, but I guess the point would be, I think there's a lot of coaches who look through the lens of the team or the collective and try and solve problems on game day at a team level, and again, that can be very, very simple and basic. I mean, let's dumb it down. Hey, the opponent has a super fast forward who's faster than all of our defenders. I've recognized that and I need to solve that. Okay. That is not tactical sophistication. That's just obvious. Some people still don't see stuff like that. But I think there's a lot more people who look through the collective than who are really skillful at teaching the individual how to do things, whether that is biomechanical, which, we'll talk about technical, passing, striking, dribbling,
Yeah.
whatever, or decision making. I think that is a far less common skill for most coaches, and it's a very, very difficult one. Now that being said, I think the very, very best coaches do both.
Of
But
course.
the phrase, the phrase that I forget where I stole it from, but all of coaching is stealing ideas, right? If you don't steal ideas from other people, you're probably not very effective as a coach. But it's the quote, uh, teams don't learn, individuals do. And so that is even when you're solving a team problem, if it's not put within the context of the individual's role and decision and actions within the collective, you're not actually teaching. You might be solving a problem, but it's the old give a man to fish, teach a man to fish, and you fishes for a lifetime, or give him fish, right? If you teach
Yeah.
them how to recognize the problem, they hopefully will solve it before you need to do anything in the future, versus if you just solve the problem for them, but not teach the individual what's happening.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you, as you usually do, articulate it different than I keep it like I said, keep it a lot more simple and say that generally coaches coach their teams and not their players.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good summary of it, or a good basic statement of it.
Yeah. But
Which,
I will acknowledge that your in-depth description is accurate.
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Welcome. So we had a great podcast last week, and um, and that did spark some questions, some conversations, and we did get a question that I think you wanted to address about a player's movement based on physical
Yeah.
ability versus technical ability.
Yeah. So we talked a lot last podcast about what are clubs going to do to manage the kids now born after August 1 who potentially can drop down an age group, once we change from the January 1 cutoff to the August 1 cutoff. And what should players or parents look at in making this decision? And we got a detailed email talking about a player who is in that category, so born after August 1. I believe, U15, but could next year drop down to a younger age group.
Yeah, remain U15, if you
Remain
will.
U15, so
Yep.
not move up. Very sounds. Let's just take it for what it's written at. A technical, successful player doing well, playing quote unquote up as it would be, uh,
Yep.
under the new format, but physically undersized and with some concern about whether the game physically will become too difficult for the player to succeed. So the parent perception is the player is skillful and quick and smart, but undersized physically and may run into growing problems at the older age groups just from a strength power perspective, maybe.
Yeah.
And they are in the age group where that is starting to happen. I think there's a huge jump between 14 and 15 in the physical level of the game. And
Yeah.
then there's probably another big jump between 15 and 16. And then maybe that degrees on the girl side, because this is a female, on the girl side, that maybe slows down. But
Yeah.
does that accurately describe the scenario?
Yeah. You want me to take the first crack at
You go
this?
ahead, take the first
Thank
crack.
you. Thank you for that. What I would say is the reality, if the player is successful and tactically, technically is there, I would argue that if the player's undersized, they are going to have to learn to play as an undersized player. I mean, there's no guarantee this player is going to grow or get bigger or get stronger, whatever. You would assume they would just naturally a little bit by getting older. So I actually think, provided the player is successful in their current environment, that maybe that's the right environment for them to stay in. It does require players to come with solutions, because physically you are not able to solve the problems necessarily with strength and power, which I think is what they're kind of alluding to, right? That the player is not strong and powerful. She's more small and quick and whatever. And so, and so I think there's a lot of value to the player staying in that environment and learning how to solve the game with soccer and IQ and things like that, um, rather than being able to rely on strength and power to make solutions. And that is with the caveat that the player is successful. Because to your point last week, you said, and I agree with you, that you have to have the proper resistance, and the player has to experience some success to continue to grow, right? And they're not getting beaten down by the level
Yeah, you
and
shouldn't be
whatever.
playing in an older age group unless you are doing very well in that age group.
Yeah, it's not some panacea that people think, right? It's not some, you know, utopia. Oh, if my kid plays up, they must be amazing, or it's the right thing, or whatever. But I do think there is something to be said um, for, and I don't know if you've experienced this. I think this is kind of, I think, anecdotal, maybe, but I tend to see that players who are smaller and later developing, at times at the end of the line, are, maybe grow a little bit more because they of their reliance on things other than strength and
You
power
mean
to
grow as a
solve the game.
player, not grow
Yeah, yeah,
physically.
yeah. Grow as a soccer player because they're forced at early ages to solve things and do things, differently. Um,
Yeah,
and
I mean, I guess I would add within this again, to me, one metric immediately of are you in the right place as a club is your ability to go talk to your coach or your director and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking as a parent. This is what I see. And I'm asking for your opinion and your expertise as the coach or director about what's best for my player
yeah,
or my son or daughter, whatever it may be. I think you have to have that conversation. And a club should be willing to have that conversation and should be able to tell you their perspective on it. And that may put it all to bed, right? Because if you don't trust the answer from your coach or your director, then I would beg the question of why are you there?
correct.
And if you don't trust anybody, then there's a different problem.
Yeah,
At some
maybe
level,
it's you.
maybe you think you're
Yeah,
the expert, but
yeah,
at the end of the day, you got to ask them their opinion. And then if the player is doing well, providing that extra level of resistance is great. And I think it's also important that, players ultimately have to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. So just like a player who is physically stronger but may not be quick is going to have to learn how to play in a different way
yeah,
and do and not do certain things in order to be successful, a player who is smaller but very fast is going to want to put themselves in some situations more than others. So, for example, that player is going to want to be in space. They're not going to probably post up and be back to goal with defenders on their back
yeah,
as much as a big, strong player. You don't want to get in a physical fight if physical power
yeah.
is not one of your strengths. But
It's
if you
not, the
are,
answer is not be more physical.
correct. The answer is put yourself in a spot to maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. And that's ultimately, I think, what successful players do in every sport at every level. They identify what they're very good at. They figure out how to get themselves in those situations more often, and then they maximize their effectiveness in those situations. Now, that doesn't mean they completely avoid doing things that they're not great at. I mean, the game doesn't allow you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I always say the way I always say this to players who maybe let's use this player as an example aren't as physical is I always say to those players, you have to be willing because physical challenges are part of the game and they're going to happen. And so you can't shy away
Yeah,
from
you
them
can't duck out of it and
when you're
back out of
confronted,
tackles.
right, by it, but you're not out there seeking it, right? You're trying to play to your strengths, to your point.
Well, it's the same thing about, your dominant foot and your weak foot. I mean,
Yeah,
at the end of the day, it's not accurate to say you have to be great with both feet.
correct. You have to be
You know,
willing,
you have to be competent with your weak
right?
foot,
Like,
if you are exceptional with your strong foot.
because the game will evolve and people will sit on your strengths, and if you can't do anything with your weak foot, then you're going to struggle
Yeah.
probably.
I
Yeah,
mean, listen, the higher the level you go, the more people are competent at a lot of things, right?
yeah,
But I think what we're stating here is that exceptional players are exceptional because of one or two attributes and things they do. They're very good or above average in everything, That's how they get to the very top. But what separates them is an exceptional characteristic or two that,
Yeah, I call them superpowers.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so having said all that, and thanks to the person who sent that question in, because I think it's a good conversation. But that, I think, transitions us to what we wanted to talk about today, which is coach, club, parent kind of communication
yeah.
as a whole, and how that should look, and you know how that plays out from the club and the coach side, how that plays out from the parent player side. Um, I I would start this by saying that it is a fact that there are three stakeholders in this process, and those are the player, the coach, and the parent. And to ignore any one of them, and I think we've said that this on this podcast before, to ignore any one of them is, I would say, is a mistake. And to think that parents aren't part of the equation or aren't part of the developmental process is wrong. They are.
Yeah, and I've been, and I would think you have a similar journey on this, but I've been on all sides of this position over different parts of my coaching career, from uh, being very interactive and vocal with parents to, putting out the Heisman
Yeah.
pose and
Yeah.
saying stay out of it, to I think being where I am now in a better spot, maybe the best spot, which is what you said, is recognizing that you can choose to engage and try and educate and understand with parents, or you can choose not to. And if you choose not to engage with parents to try and educate parents, you are ultimately going, I think, to either regret it, or you're going to miss opportunities to stop problems from happening or address problems when they are minor issues and before they become major issues. Because my sense, my experience in parents is that there's a growing number of them that have experience in the sport, and
Sure.
that's positive. That helps to some degree, but a lot of them still do not have a ton of experience there.
Christian, I
To
don't know if you know this or not, but I played high school soccer.
There you go.
I
There
did
you go.
play high
Yes.
school
So
soccer.
therefore,
If
you
you're
understand it
wondering,
all.
if you're
There.
wondering.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Don't. Yeah. That
Sorry.
that is not a good. That is not a good gauge of your
Yeah,
understanding
that's
level.
yeah.
And I was going
Right.
to say, even if you
But maybe
played,
it is, maybe it isn't though.
well, if they get, let's just say, okay, that gives you, hey, I kicked a ball. Great. You've kicked a ball. That's great. That maybe give you better understanding than somebody who's not in some ways about, technical actions or basic concepts of decision making in the game or organization. That's still very different than having ever been in a role of trying to teach somebody something or organize a team, right?
Yeah. Right.
But what I was going to say is, just, with or without that, I think the vast majority of parents want one thing, and that is they want a positive experience for their kids and to see them have success. And when that doesn't happen, and by the way, that not happening may have nothing to do with the coach,
Right.
but
And
when it,
honestly, that not happening might be very beneficial at
correct.
times
So
for
let's
the
so let's
development.
start
Yeah.
with this. We agree. The vast majority of parents, because it's kind of psychopathic if you that's not what your goal is, to be honest.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
But if the goal is for my kid to have a good experience and learn and be successful, and that good experience includes all, the things like learning how to be resilient, learning how to function in a team, learning how to work hard, learning how to be tough, all that stuff, right? And it also includes learning how to be a soccer player and the specific things of a sport. If we start with that, and that's what the vast majority of parents want, when there are problems, it usually comes when there is not success, whether that is the team loses a lot or the player is not performing well. And by performing, I mean maybe they're not starting and you wanted them to start. Maybe they're playing 50% of the game and you wish they would play 75 or 100% of the game. Maybe when they go out there, they're just losing the ball a lot, or they're not doing something you can tell that the coach is asking them to do. But there's some obstacle or adversity that stops the success. And that is when 90% of the problems begin. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And I think the issue is parents, especially parents who don't have a big background in the sport, are not very adept at identifying why the adversity or why the problem has occurred. And if you don't know what the problem is caused by and you try to solve it, you may end up putting a square peg in a round hole, addressing the wrong issue, handling it the wrong way. And I think that's where parent education and parent engagement is most effective. If get is giving parents a process and a guideline on how do you handle those situations when there is that initial feeling of, hey, this isn't maybe going how I wanted it to go. What do I do about it?
Yeah, I think, and again, we've said this, I think, before, but I think, much like I said to you in our last little discussion here about players, that a lot of coaches do talk to the team and don't do a great job talking to the individual players. I think that's true. I think coaches avoid or don't do a good job communicating what their plan is. And I think that is the number one, that's the fallacy, because you can't, if you don't articulate.
So you've identified a problem on both sides. On the coach side, the coach has not provided
Correct.
a clear communication of here's what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and here is how you should handle various situations or address them. And the parent has not done an effective job of saying, take a breath, and before you jump to a conclusion and act,
Well,
maybe ask.
I won't even get there yet,
Okay.
right? Because again, I would say a large number of coaches, particularly younger ones, don't do a great job of saying, here is what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it, why I think it's important. Here's what I think philosophically. Here's probably what you're going to see based on my experience. And there's no reason to lose it. And then I'm going to be transparent with you about the development of your kid, right? That just doesn't happen enough. And then, so what happens when you do that is obviously then parents who are big stakeholders in this and invested, and rightly so, they're trying to guide their young child in the right way. They are left to try to figure out and put the pieces of the puzzle together on their own. And they may not have the experience or the knowledge or that to do that. And
Well, it's
so,
the old causation is not correlation.
right. And so I think it is the responsibility of the coach and the club to a greater degree to say, here is what we think, what we believe in, how we're going to do this, and how it's going to look. And then you have to, and that gives you as a coach all of the,
Well, it gives you something
you
to
know,
refer back to.
yeah, that's correct. That's exactly what I was going to say. So that is that's one of the huge and the biggest causes of problems, I
Well,
think.
and I guess again, I reflect on my own journey on that too, because when you're the coach, and let's say now you're the well-meaning coach who is trying to do that, and you want to be very transparent and clear about what it is you're doing and why and how. A lot of parents don't really want to know every single detail, and if you go
Well, I don't
too
think you have to give them all the
well,
detail.
that's my point. Because once you get into it, though, and you say, "Hey, I believe this. I need to make sure they understand, and I want to try and help educate and engage and whatever," you can go down in the weeds so much that nobody really hears what you're saying. So I think there's a balance even in that that is both how deep you go,
Not
and
too
then
deep.
not too deep, and but also you need to do it more than once. It's what we say about any leadership position.
100%.
You got to communicate and communicate and communicate and
Yeah.
communicate. And if
I
you
think I
don't
said this.
communicate, it
I,
opens a vacuum.
I think I said this to our board one time, which is, this is my little analogy on this, is I said, we have a staff of 40 people in the ECNL or whatever the number is, and uh, and the culture and the care to have a successful staff requires constant care and attention. And that's the same thing. Like you can't say one time, this is what I think, this is what I believe, you have to say, this is what I believe, this is how we're going to do this. And then you have to come back and say, okay, I know I said this, here's where I think we are on the path, here's what we need to do better, here's what we're going, you have to stay. This is a journey. You don't have to talk to him every week. You don't have to talk to him every day, but you better do it along the journey, because if you don't, then rightly so, the people along that journey will start to think whatever they think. It's the same thing with players, Christian. If you don't talk to players frequently about their journey and how they get better on an individual basis, they're going to start thinking about whatever they think about.
Yeah, there was a quote I saw somewhere, and I'll butcher it, but it was basically that over the course of a month, I'll just say, a person will read and hear, and again, I don't remember the detail, but 1 billion words, something like that, in the course of a month, between conversations and reading and watching TV and hearing radio, whatever, 1 billion words. And in that context, if you've said something one time, and so your, 200 word, well-reasoned, well-articulated email was one of the, was 200 words of the billion that they got in the last month, the odds of them remembering that, and especially remembering it 3-4 weeks later, are low. So it's just a general leadership principle that communication and consistently repeating communication is essential to making sure the other part of the communication process, the listener, actually understands it. It's the old Doug Lemoff. There's a difference between I taught it and they learned it.
Yeah. And then if you want to dig a little deeper on how coaches communicate their philosophy, your philosophy and what you believe and how you're going to do things has to be simple. And it has to be easy to understand, because to your point, you're going to say it a lot. Right. And that, I think, the art is in the simplicity of it. Like, you're not going to talk about, your overlapping goalkeeper and, whatever. That's how the sausage is made. I don't think you need to get that deep to it, to your point. But you're right. This is an ongoing thing. This is a journey that will have many, many, many touch points along the way. And you have to stay on it. And then to just decide that one part of the equation of stakeholders, being the parents, are not part of it is crazy. And to that point, I will also say, to our earlier point, I think coaches need to do a better job of coaching players individually, because they also have to know what it is. Right. So I think if all those people are connected as much as they can be, then you're good. So I think, and I think you agree with me, that the first responsibility in this process is to the stakeholder, the coach and the club, who are the professionals at it. They bear the initial responsibility in this, to set the culture and the tone and the environment as to how this is going to be. And then they need to live it every single day. And then when they're going to make adjustments to it, because you are along the way, you need to communicate those adjustments. And that is the initial responsibility in this, no matter how you slice it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we talk about that, all right, so now let's put our parent hat on. You're the dad of a young soccer player. I'm the dad of a soccer player who's older, right? My son's 15, freshman in high school. We're experiencing high school soccer for the first time. And by the way, the coach told us at the beginning of the season what was going to happen. We agreed, to our point, we agreed to be part of that, just like every other player. I will not probably speak to the coach for the entire season. I haven't talked to him yet. We're halfway through. I will never talk to him, probably, because he told me, I see with my eyes what they're doing. we agreed to be part of that situation. And so I'm supporting my kid in doing it, period. So,
Well,
now
and
that might
on
be the
that note,
extreme. Like, that might be the extreme of not even talking to the coach at all, you know? But he told us what he was going to do and how he was going to do it. We said, okay, we're in, right? And now my son's 15 though. So it's time for him to start, handling these things on his own, in my opinion. Your son is 8. So you have to advocate for him probably a little bit more with
yeah,
his
but I
coach,
think,
who is known to be very difficult.
I would say though on that there is there an age at which it is too young? And let's with the acknowledgement that soccer starts around generally 6, 7, 8. That it is too young to encourage your son or daughter to speak to their coach. That doesn't mean come to them with, your 7-year-old come to them with a concern about playing time or necessarily or whatever, but to encourage them to have the confidence to speak with another adult. I think it's great to encourage players to do that at every age. And again, how you say it is at 8 or 9 or 10 is different than 15. But I think we've all coached players who at age 15 and 16 have a very difficult time having a conversation with their coach.
So let me ask you this. Have you, as the coach, created the environment for the player to want to do that or
Yeah.
feel comfortable to do that? And again, I'm not saying that this is the only way, or saying what I'm doing is great or greater than someone else. What we do is, when a player comes to training, they have to come, and I took this from I observed the Philly Union Academy for a couple weeks many years ago, and my good friend Chris Brewer was coaching there, and they required every player when they came in to come and shake the coach's hand and say, "Hello, I'm here." And then when practice was over, they had to do the same thing. So I took that, to your point, coaching is stealing. I took that and put that in place in my teams. So even from the youngest age, you have to come and say, "Hey, coach, how are you?" That means I create this moment where you have to engage with me every single training session at the beginning, and then at the end, you have to do the same thing. Sometimes it's quick, we're out of here. Sometimes it is gives me the opportunity to say, "Oh yeah, Christian, I thought you were excellent today. I really like the way you've been training." Or, "Christian, it seems like something's going on with you. Is everything okay?" Right? I think by doing those kinds of things, you create an environment where players will be more comfortable asking you. Now,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last thing I'm going to say about this, sorry, I want to finish this, is I always tell players, and I think this is an important thing to say: if you ask the question, I'm going to give you the answer, and it might not necessarily be in line with what you think. So if you're going to ask me a question, I'm happy to have it, but I'm going to tell you the
Yeah.
answer.
When I ask you, why am I not playing as much?
Yeah,
You
right.
can't be mad at the answer of what you're not doing and what you're not very good at.
That's correct. And I also have expressed that to parents, that I'm here for you. If you have a question, I'm always available to answer it. But if you ask me the question, I'm going to give you the answer. Right. And it's just my answer. Doesn't mean it's right for you, but it's my answer. And I'm the one that is charged with running this team, this group. Right. So, so I think you're right. I think, but if you want young players to come and talk to you, it requires, I think, more than saying to a parent, "Hey, have your kid come and talk to me." It's more about the coach creating
Yeah,
the
you're just
environment.
talking about what is good general practice in a
Yeah.
training environment, and we have similar expectations of greet every player. I
Right.
talk about ending sessions on an intentional note, not just ending with, "Hey, it's whatever, it's 6:30. See you guys."
Yeah.
But it's bring people together. It's an opportunity to reset mentally and emotionally, It's an opportunity to re-emphasize something. But we're sort of diverting
Yeah,
here because
sorry.
we're talking about parents and the parent-player relationship. One thing, there's probably some do's and don'ts that we can give on these things. No, number one is everybody, and this is just general human. Everybody's having a journey of their own, and they've got their own things going on. So it's always, I think Carrie said this to me once, and it's resonated with before when you're evaluating a coach. So if you're watching a coach as a director, or you're looking at a coach and trying to decide whether to hire them or whatever it may be, before you judge the coach on what they're doing, you should ask why. Why do you think they're doing this? Because it may be for a completely different, maybe what they want out of today is a completely different thing than what you think.
Sure.
And once understanding that, you would say, oh, well, I get that. And I would say that same advice applies to a parent is, when something happens, the first thing you should think about is, well, is there something that maybe I'm not thinking about that the coach is trying to do here? Because just like you'd say, almost every parent wants their kid to have a positive experience where they have some success. Every coach, no coach, or again, no coaches start the season saying, man, I hope I got a bunch of unhappy kids and then we don't do well.
Yeah, that's right.
There's nobody's now, whether they're doing all the things they can or as well as they can and making these positive outcomes happen is a different question, but it's not intentional. We got fundamental attribution error here of people assuming that when something goes wrong, it's because the coach wanted it to go wrong.
Ill-intended, yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. Like I definitely wanted this kid to be upset and not perform well and then therefore not play as much. And this was
Yeah.
all part of the plan.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I don't. I hear you. I think everybody goes in with the best of intentions,
So it
for
starts with
sure.
some grace,
Yeah, I think
give some
that's
grace.
I think that's a big deal. I think that's a big deal. I think when I think it's an important thing to say and think about is like, what do I think this coach's intentions are? They're probably good, right? To start
Well,
with,
and,
to your
and so
point.
that's like the stop and say, okay, maybe I should just put myself in their shoes, walk a mile, whatever it may be. The other part is, and I'll use an analogy. We always talk about goals change games, and as silly as that sounds, the emotional difference. I mean, I'll give you one or two situations. If you have been outplayed all half, the team is not performing well. The players are not doing what you wanted them to do. Whatever, forget the age level, whatever. It's been a terrible half, and you're losing 1-0, and then somehow, by the grace of God, you score an equalizer right before halftime,
Oh
and it's
yeah.
now 1-1. It is a totally different emotional level in that
Yeah.
halftime than it would have been 30 seconds before. And by the way, you might not have earned that goal. It may have been completely against the run of play. It changes nothing about the 45 minutes or the 30 minutes or whatever it was you were coaching. But there's an emotional difference of that goal. And I would say the same thing is when you're a parent or you're a coach and the feeling you have in the moment and the feeling you have in the 5 minutes after the game is almost always dramatically different than the feeling you have 2 or 3 hours later.
Absolutely.
And so, number one is
I
take a
will
step
say
back.
when you lose in a national championship game, it never leaves you.
No, that's gonna, yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Um, but I'm talking about that emotional response of how
Yeah.
important this moment was, or how big of a deal that one thing the coach said was, or what one action that happened, whatever it may be. It always It always feels different. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean your initial reaction of whether it was right or wrong or good or bad is necessarily wrong. It means that the way you're going to handle it is way better a couple hours later. It's why most clubs have like a 24-hour policy. They
Yeah.
try to say don't go
Yeah.
talk to the coach about playing time right after the game.
Yeah.
That's not just to give the coach a window, and stop confrontations on the field. That is part of it. But the main part is everybody looks at things a little bit different when they're sitting with a cup of coffee at home rested than when they're hot, sweaty, tired, mad, frustrated, whatever it may be. And so I think there's some guy on both sides, by the way, that's a parent and a coach.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think you would agree that you've probably said some things right after games to teams, and you were like,
Well,
given a
hey,
little
here's the
bit of
example.
perspective, I
Yeah,
probably
but
could have
here's what's the
handled
answer.
that
Whenever
different.
whenever a coach has a long post game,
Yeah.
okay, and by the way, we've all had them. The
By the way,
long post game.
also the players aren't listening.
Yeah,
Just
so the
FYI.
player goes back to the parent, and the parent says, "Hey, so what did the coach say?" And
Yeah.
the answer is,
I don't know.
"I don't know." I mean, so as a coach, you know, unless you're into performative art,
Yeah.
like
Right.
there's not a lot of reason to give a long post game
Yeah.
because nobody's listening. And by the way, to our previous point, you'll probably word it and phrase it differently in 24 hours anyway.
Yeah.
And again, it usually comes from a good place. All right. The coach is trying to say, well, I'm going to give some feedback right now in a very timely basis and very specific,
Yeah.
and forget that, they're not emotionally or even, mentally in any space to really receive that feedback. So if you're going to give one or two things, that is not the time besides one or two basic things.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Couple other things.
Yes. So let's take a quick break. And when we come
Quick break.
back, I want you to look at and let's give some I don't know, advice isn't maybe the right word to parents
Yeah.
on this, because I think we've taken this a lot from the coach's perspective, and we probably need to take it to the parents' perspective. Um, Quick Goal, one of our sponsors, take your training to the next level with Quick Goals, full range of professional quality equipment from training goals, cones, mannequins, and more. Shop now and save 25% with code ECNL25 at checkout. Nike. Nike is a proud sponsor of ECNL. Nothing can stop what we can do together to bring positive change to our communities. You can't stop sport because hashtag you can't stop our voices. Follow Nike on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And last but not least, Discount Tire. Want the same expert advice from the pros at a Discount Tire store while shopping online? Meet Treadwell, your personal tire guide. Whether you're driving to practice or game day, Treadwell gives you tire recommendations based on your vehicle, location, and driving habits. Get matched with the perfect tires so you can stay focused on the goals that matter most. Shop with Treadwell at discounttire.com. Thanks to all our sponsors, Mark Pro, Nike, soccer.com, Quick Gold, Discount Tire, and Continental Tire, for your partnership and your support of the league. Now, Christian, put your parent hat on. Put your parent hat on. What advice would you give to parents? Because I'm sure you've dealt with some already in your zone one coaching. We've all done it. We've been doing this for a long time. Give me your thoughts.
Well, I think in the same way that we say coaches should be specific and coach to individuals, right? And even in the collective concept, you got to tie that down to how do the individual actions and decisions and behaviors, determine the collective. I think parents need to speak on behalf of their child. So, if you're the parent who says, I am speaking on behalf of the silent majority, you generally are not.
Well,
Because
coaches will generally stop listening, right?
correct. Because number one, there is social dynamics, and when you're, complaining or whatever on the sideline, there's a lot of parents will just nod along with you because they don't want to get into a dispute with you about it, and that doesn't mean they necessarily agree with you, because if they did, they might address the coach themselves. So, I would say, please do not take the perspective as the appointed union representative
Yeah.
who is speaking on
This
behalf
is
of
not a
so many.
class action lawsuit.
Correct. And you are not appointed to represent everybody else. So, even if you think you are, it doesn't help what you're about to talk about by saying that there are many, many people talking to you, and you are the voice of the
Yeah.
the weak.
Yeah.
So I would say don't do that, because you should be speaking about your situation, your beliefs, what you see about your player. And that's the second piece to that is there is generally, I think, nothing positive that ever happens about one of parent talking about somebody else's child. So Unless there is an issue going on between the kids that is
Yeah, right.
behavioral or bullying or something
Yeah.
like that, there is generally no positive at all from making a comment about somebody else's kid, good or bad, or in comparison to your kid or anything like that, because every scenario is different. And so even if you feel like, well, this player in this situation got treated this way, and my player in the same situation got treated that way, the reality is that there's probably 4 or 5 other variables that you don't even know about that dictated the reason that if there was a difference in treatment, that difference in treatment was applied. Agreed?
Yeah. Yeah. Keep going.
Uh, okay, keep going
Keep
here.
going. You're on a roll.
You know, I think start, as we said, start with an open mind. It's the same. This is not a cross examination. And it's very obvious when it becomes one where a parent has sort of an end in mind. These conversations should be initiated early enough in whatever concern there is that your reaction is, I just want to understand and feel and identify ways I can help. And I think if you bring questions early, that's more likely to be your mindset. Now, if you sit on it for weeks on end and don't say anything, then by the time the dam breaks, for example, you may walk into to this interaction a lot more conclusory than you would if you asked a question early on. And then I'd kind of default and wrap it all up with, if you've got questions about everything all the time and
Maybe
doubts
it's you.
about everything
Yeah.
all the time, there's one of two things. Either maybe you are the one, or maybe it's time to go to another
Yeah.
club.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, if you just don't like it, absent, really, really, really not good things happening. If you just don't like it, you don't like the personality of the coach, or you don't like the way the club does things, then go and,
Yeah.
do so gracefully.
Yeah. I mean, this is, what parents look for should be in the big picture. What is the track record of this club in getting players where my child's aspirations or talent align? Because then that can change because, kids start young and things change. So that's the big picture. And then what does the coach believe in and what's their philosophy? Do I align to that philosophy? As step two. The next step is, do I see the coach's stated philosophy coming out when I observe my kid playing in this situation? And if the answer is yes, then you're good, right? And you're always, obviously we talked about this last podcast. You're looking to see if your child is improving, getting better, continue to have the proper resistance, whatever. And then I think it's perfectly to your point, to be curious, because a lot of times the parent is going on this journey along with their child as a support person, but to gain knowledge and understanding. And so having that curiousness to find out why or what we're doing or how you're doing it or whatever, I think great. That's great. If at any point you say, my kid is no longer, and the other thing I'll say this is you have to be able to differentiate between your child struggling and needing to experience that struggle to get better, because struggle doesn't necessarily just mean that your kid is bad. And by the way, when your kid struggles, they're likely going to like it less, and helping them push through that so that they can use that adversity to be more successful. Remember when Anson said snowplow,
Yeah, the
now we're at the
snowplow
snowplow,
parent,
we're trying to
helicopter parent.
right, we're trying to move obstacles out of the way of our kid. And instead of that, saying, hey, listen, this is part of it, right? This is part of it. So having said all that, Then, if at some point your child is not getting better, or you no longer align with the philosophy, or you don't align with the philosophy of the coach or the club, then it's time for you as an individual to go look to do something different. Not you and the group, or you to your point as a spokesman for the group, but you and your child in their individual situation. Full
Yeah,
stop.
and I would add a couple of comments to that. Number one is I think in a lot of scenarios, your child will act in the way you model. And so if something happens, and again, we're talking about these minor moments of adversity. You know, they make a mistake in the game, they get criticized, they don't start, they don't play a lot in this game, or they whatever, something you feel it was unfair. I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying it's what's called a minor moment of adversity. This is one of the values of sport that parents over and over and over talk about why their kids are in sport is to learn resilience. And so when those moments happen, if you treat it like the end of the world, so will your kid. And that opportunity to
Yeah.
develop resilience disappears, as opposed to your point saying, hey, this happens. This happens in the journey. Sometimes things don't go the way you want, and you just gotta roll your sleeves up and work, or you just gotta move on. You made the mistake, or something happened you didn't like. It's time to move on and just keep working.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the kids will, even if there's some emotion in it, will say, well, okay, I will do that. And it moves on. And the kid has learned, okay, I can distinguish between big things and little things, and I can
Yeah.
learn how to
Yeah.
handle things.
Yeah.
So now, if there's just in the same way, say the appropriate amount of resistance is important. The appropriate amount of resilience is important because if there's too many challenges that just keep coming up over and over and over and over again, that you're not going to develop a lot of resilience when you just keep getting punched in the face, right?
Yeah.
But be aware of hey, the first time there's a bump, that's probably not the time to do anything
Yeah.
except to say, hey, it's okay, work through it.
Yeah.
Now, the third or fourth time in a short period of time, well, maybe that's the time to ask the question. But I think you can model behavior on that because they will very much react in a way that is aligned to how you react, and it's a great opportunity to teach a young player. We talk about with our kids sometimes the difference between big things and little things. Is this a
Yeah.
big thing that you really should be upset about? And this is not sport specific, this is just
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or
Right.
is this a little thing? And yeah, it didn't
But it
happen.
transcends sport, right? It's
Correct.
yeah,
Correct.
for sure. I love that.
Not pretending that I'm the expert on this in any
No,
way.
no, but yeah, I mean, but I think you're right. I think it is helping them through those times, and the house isn't necessarily on fire, and we don't have to make extreme decisions and extreme reactions in every situation. Um, so yeah, I mean, man, a lot of kids quit the sport because of the interactions with their parents. And that is not to absolve coaches or anyone else who may also create bad environments that make kids quit sports, but
Well, and let me
kids
jump on
quit
that.
sports because they're not fun.
Well, that's true. And what I would say is if you have a coach that's creating some adversity and resilience for your kid, maybe very intentionally, okay, because that is part of teaching. And
Yeah.
as they get older, deliberately created adversity is actually what we call learning. It's an
Yeah. Yeah.
overload in the soccer sense, but if a coach is doing that, and then you add on to that as a parent, that's that's when the adversity can become too big.
Yeah. Right.
There's a
Yeah. That's a great point.
there's a famous quote, and I forget which coach it was, but he said, I got when I see kids with a lot of cream in their life, I add a little shit, and when there's a lot of shit in their life, I add a little cream. And excuse the language, but
That's
the
great.
point being that you a coach needs to be able to balance those scenarios because if everything's perfect all the time and there's no challenges and there's no adversity, well, there's no opportunity to grow resilience. There's question about, whether they're learning much, right? And on the other end, if everything is really just hard and a slog and not fun and just so much resistance and adversity, well, then they're not going to like the sport. The answer to me is in the middle, and you'd lean towards, you want more positive than negative for sure. Whether
Yeah.
that's 70%, 80%, 90%, probably also depends on the age, the aspiration, and all that. But 100, 0, or 0, 100 is not where you want to be.
Yeah. Right. Right. Totally. Well, again, I know we touch on a lot of things and we go a lot of places on this, but I just think it's important to talk about this stuff. It can be a little bit, uncomfortable. And, uh, you know, I think parents need to understand, coaches need to understand, players need to understand. So again, it's about communication, I think, first and foremost. And I do think the club bears the responsibility and the coach bears the initial responsibility in that. So, you know, that's our take on it. Christian, you ready for Bracken Brainbuster?
I am. I
You
am.
ready
I was
for it?
just
All right,
out of.
Jacob. Jacob's got a. Yeah, this is going to be. Uh, this is for you, Jacob. This question is for you, literally for you. I feel
I am
like
honored.
you get a little unheralded. You're unheralded member, and behind the scenes, you're always working hard. First, I was definitely poked by Jacob. I do want to recognize one of our big sponsors, and that's Continental Tire. Score big with Continental Tire. Continental Tire has your back. Your tire is designed for top-notch traction, handling, and durability. Drive with confidence and ensure your family's comfort on every journey. Find your dealer at continentaltire.com. Continental Tire, the smart choice in tires. So thanks for reminding me on that, Jacob. Here we go with Bracken's Brainbuster, dedicated to Jacob. Best band of all time. Best band, musical band of all time. And if you say Depeche Mode or something like that, then you're no longer gonna get anything, in your honor on this. Jacob, I'm gonna let you go first. I know you're a huge music guy.
I am a huge music guy, but best is such a
Oh,
wide-ranging
come on.
Come
discussion
on.
because if are we talking favorite? Are we talking most influential? Because if it's
It's a
influential,
personal. It's
You pick
personal.
whatever you
I
want.
mean,
You
Pick
get. You
whatever
can
you
my
find
want.
the
If you
category.
my favorite band of all time is a band called A Day to Remember. They are
Here we
a
go. Something obscure.
Somebody
You knew it
nobody's
was
heard
coming.
they
of.
are
There was a
You knew it was
band in
a
your
coming.
high
pop
school. I get it.
they're a
I
pop
should have
punk metalcore
never.
band out of Ocala, Florida, but I've seen them 8 times live in 7 different cities. They are
Wow.
my favorite band. They are so good. They have
I
such a
think
wide range of musical talents, and they put on one of the most fun shows that I've ever seen as well.
you're
So,
like groupie
um,
status with that group.
yeah, when I worked for the Iowa Wild, they played a show at our arena, and I may not have taken 10 trips down to the locker room just to walk past them every hour before the
Wow.
show.
Just
That's
hoping they
true
say, "Hey,
fandom.
buddy, come
Just,
on here
yep,
and play the
I
drums."
Yes.
I don't fanboy much being with professional athletes. I don't fanboy much, but with music artists and specifically that band, they're one that I fanboy with.
You fan. Christian, do you fanboy at all?
I
Are you?
don't.
I
No.
Me neither.
No.
I'm not a fan. Not a fanboy. You know who I saw in the airport the other day? Kyle Korver.
I don't even know
Saw
who
him in
that
Salt
is.
Lake City. Great shooter, plays in the NBA. Great
I don't.
shooter.
Yep.
I don't really
He was
watch the
sitting right
NBA.
there. I didn't even say anything. I was just like, oh, there's Kyle Korver. All right, Christian. That was a tangent. Best band of all time.
Let's see. And unlike Jacob, I'm not gonna just knocking back and forth in this. I'm
This is
just
where
gonna
you
say,
come out as a Taylor Swift fan, and it's
yeah, right.
okay.
Yeah,
It's
right.
fine.
I'm gonna
One
say
of many on staff.
best band. I got to go with you two.
You
Been
too.
around 4 or 5 decades now.
Yeah.
Music that's got meaning, depth. I
Okay.
could do without some of the other pontification,
Are
but
they your favorite band?
I think they're my favorite band. I would say if you said best singer of all time, you got to go with Frank Sinatra.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Usually Dean, when he's on here, he has 2 answers.
He's
And
going to
today
say,
it
when
was
I hear my
Christian's.
wife singing to me, it's the
Yes.
most melodic song in the world.
Whatever Leah sings. Dean, this is what you get when you don't come on here. You get that. Man, I've kind of gone all over the map. I feel like when I was young, in my high school years, a big like rap Beastie Boys, huge. Uh, and then I went to college, and I probably took a more like Pearl Jam, Nirvana kind of
Jeremy
deal.
spoke in class today.
Yeah, Pearl Jam is definitely up there. More lately, I'm more like a Chris Stapleton,
I
Tyler
like Chris
Childers
Stapleton.
kind
He's good.
Yeah.
of guy. But I'm gonna say Pearl Jam will be
All right.
my best band ever.
Grunge band,
Grunge
Portland,
grunge
right?
band. Seattle,
No, Seattle.
Seattle. So that's our little venture away from
Best Pearl
soccer
Jam
life.
song, Yellow Ledbetter. I have no idea what he says anywhere in it, but it's got a hell of a melody.
Black is also a good song.
Black is good
Pearl
as
Jam
well.
song. There's a lot of good Pearl Jam songs.
There's a lot of good.
Next time we'll ask everybody except Jacob what their favorite song is. So, what would Christian? What would your wife Haley say? Her favorite is.
She would probably say, who is the female Christian singer was on American Idol? I'm blanking.
Like
She's big now.
Carrie Underwood?
No.
Kelly
Lauren Daigle.
Clarkson? Lauren Daigle.
She would
Okay.
go Lauren Daigle.
All right. Jacob, what about your better half?
Laura's favorite band is a band called Falling in Reverse, who is another metalcore band.
What is going on?
Going on in your
Falling in
household?
Reverse is one of the biggest rock bands currently in the scene. They've got like 10 million Spotify listeners. We've seen them probably 4 or 5 times now. They're so
if you
good.
want to
We
hear
saw them like
pots
a week
and
ago.
pans banging together
Like
with some drums in the middle.
I envision that musical conversations in the Bourne household are
Pretty
deep
intense.
and obscure.
Yeah.
But
intense.
Obscure.
And loud.
You know my better half.
They're
is
loud
T
for
Swift.
sure.
You know my better half is T Swift all the way.
Oh, yeah.
Every day, all day, every day. So shout out to all the Swifties out there.
All right. Good discussion.
Yes.
Good discussion. If there's specific questions on these issues, as always, we're not the experts. We're just sharing from our opinions.
Yeah. Send your questions. It's info@the-ECNL, right? info@the-ECNL.com. We love getting questions. It does spark, our kind of brains to start thinking about these kinds of things and talking about them. So I agree. Great conversation. And thanks to everybody who listens, and keep sending those questions our way.
Fantastic.
See you guys next week.